Hi, it's me, and welcome to Going Rogue, a series in which I spread the good word about roguelikes by shining a spotlight on them one at a time in an effort to share what this genre has to offer. Or at least that's the thesis statement. In reality, it's a way for me to blab into the void about my obsession. If someone happens to listen, well hey, that's just swell. Today we're looking at Nova Drift, a game which first and foremost has a badass name. For real, Nova Drift. I don't know, is it just me? It's like an awesome name. Luckily, the game itself is pretty darn cool too. I bought this a while ago and loved it, and considering it just recently launched its 1.0, seems like a great time to talk about it. So to sum up Nova Drift, it's a space shoot 'em up with a simple but vibrant art direction, an incredibly satisfying feel, and an impressive build variety that gives a lot of agency to the player. Let's get into it. Once you fire up your run, you're just dropped straight in. Right off the bat, you'll notice that this game controls not like a twin-stick shooter, but instead like classic asteroids. This means you won't be strafing and shooting at the same time. You can only thrust forward, and if you want to go in the opposite direction, you'll have to physically turn around. Adding to this, you've got low friction to deal with, meaning you'll have to factor your momentum in when you let off the gas, or you may end up drifting much further than you meant to. Depending on your experiences, this may come off as an unorthodox control scheme, but it does work well when you learn to, well, control it. Plus, besides some specific upgrades, the game can be controlled entirely with the mouse, using right-click to thrust and left-click to shoot, which is pretty nice. And lastly, the screen wraps around on itself, so if you fly off the left side, you'll come back in on the right. The whole game is played right here. Very quickly, you'll start having enemies spawn in wave after wave. Destroy some of these and they'll drop XP orbs.
Did you see it?
Once you have enough to level up, you can choose an upgrade mod in a process that's not all too different from Vampire Survivors in a way, despite coming out before it. Your first 3 upgrades will always follow the same formula. The first will let you pick your weapon. These cover a wide range of choices covering all kinds of playstyle. Multi-shot, swords, cluster bombs, a long-range railgun, a damage over time dart, you name it. Then your second upgrade will decide your shield. These regenerate over time and protect your hull as you'd expect, but they also have their own stats and unique benefits, often applying in an area around your ship. The amp shield has crap protection values, but boosts your damage if you want to be a glass cannon. The shockwave shield releases pulses to push away enemies and projectiles and releases, unsurprisingly, a shockwave when it recharges. Your choice of shield also decides the color of your ship and attacks, which is a fun little aesthetic choice. And then lastly, for the third upgrade, you'll be picking your body type. Again, each has its own stats as well as passive abilities. The Sentinel gives big bonuses to your shield if you want to double down on it. The Courser gives extra projectiles, but causes them to split and fire on both sides of your ship. The Hullbreaker makes you resistant to crashes while making them do more damage to the enemy because, yes, this game has build options that encourage you to make ramming into everything your main method of attack. After these initial 3, every level up will take from a pool of choices that cover, well, a lot of stuff. Each comes in the form of what you might call a micro skill tree, consisting of 4 nodes, and you can eventually get all of them if you want. More bullets, more damage, better health and shields, faster thrust and rotation speed, burn damage, explosion size, crash damage, the ability to deploy constructs. There is a lot you can pick from, slowly adding to your build one piece at a time. They all seem so thoughtfully designed too, the way they integrate into different styles so you rarely feel like you're wasting a mod. To explain what I mean, take the salvo weapon for example. Essentially, this lets you stockpile missiles over time while you're not shooting, then release them all at once when you fire. With the way this functions, you might think that upgrades to projectile count or fire rate are redundant because those things function differently with salvo. But no, they will instead increase the number of missiles stocked at each interval and decrease the time between intervals respectively. You can also find super mods, which only appear in the pool after you own some other specific mods as prerequisites. These tend to have more drastic effects that relate to the mods you needed to acquire them. Enemies will also drop reroll tokens to help you sift through the pile, and you'll always have a random choice of weapon, shield, and body down here at the bottom just in case you change your mind during the course of a run. So you'll continue to fight through waves the game throws at you, and every 20 levels you'll fight a boss. Each of these are fun to battle, sporting some interesting designs and mechanics. It might not be the most exciting boss, but I have a soft spot for this guy, Station Omega. If you're careful to avoid its beams and projectiles, you can fly right inside and shoot at these weak spot nodes for a ton of extra damage. You'll find the boss design creates some matchups for or against the player, depending on your build. For example, this boss here has a few precise weak spots, meaning a precise weapon will fare very well. But a multi-shot build based around having as many projectiles as possible will struggle in that same fight. One thing I really love about the enemy design in general is that many of these mirror options that the player themselves can get, sporting familiar weapon types, leaving behind fiery trails or minefields. It makes it feel like the enemies are making their own little builds in tandem with you, and I don't know, I find that charming. Other than that, you'll find cargo ships to shoot down in cold blood and collect the extra XP inside, the occasional meteor shower or black hole hazards, and a temporary power-up here and there. But with that said, that's pretty much the entire game. I just explained almost everything possible. Nova Drift is not a complex title. It's not throwing completely off-the-wall concepts at you or performing genre-shattering feats, but what it does very well. The game has a solid foundation and it feels so damn good to play. It looks nice, the sound design is oh so satisfying. And most importantly, the build variety from run to run is enjoyable and rewarding to experiment with. This brings me to Wild Metamorphosis. This is a mode that you can enable on the main menu, and personally, it's the only way I play the game and the one I'd recommend. All this really does is cut the amount of rerolls you get in half and adds in an entire pool of wild mods to the game that you can pick from. These will often offer trade-offs for your build. For example, the Heavy Caliber mod increases your damage but adds recoil to your attacks. The Farsight mod will zoom the camera out, letting you see more of the battlefield, but also makes you take a tad bit more damage. One could argue that this dilutes the mod pool a bit and adds unpredictability, but the prospect of having more variety and more options is a win in my book. Curiously, the game states that this is a roguelite mode, which is a bit confusing. The definitions have juggled around so much, but these days roguelite is most commonly used to describe a roguelike with meta progression that makes you permanently more powerful between runs, and that does not exist in Nova Drift. Furthermore, having more options and less rerolls doesn't really make this any more or less of a roguelike experience, but I digress. I consider Wild Metamorphosis to be the definitive way to play the game, but you might disagree. The wild mods add an even higher degree of customization to your build than there already was. I think the thing that impresses me most is not just the options you have for different playstyles, but the options within a playstyle, the different ways that you can approach the same mechanics. Here's a strong example. Let's say you want to play a run where you focus on using constructs, things that can be deployed and then inevitably destroyed, after which they'll come back following a short assembly timer. Alright, well, let's look at our options for constructs in the game. Well, first off, you have two weapons, the blade and the swords, both of which count as constructs and are affected by construct-based mods. Then you could take the Bastion shield, which deploys a forward-facing barrier that is also a construct. And then we have the ship bodies. The engineer is great if you want lots of constructs out at once. Or conversely, you might take the architect if you'd prefer to have a single, extra powerful construct. Then there's the carrier, which doesn't have abilities that affect constructs, but instead creates a swarm of little ships that are. After that, you can take mods that give mines, turrets, drones, or ally ships, mods that buff each of them individually, or all constructs in general, or even some wild mods that let you specialize in a specific type of construct, increasing its effectiveness, but making the other types redeploy more slowly. This is all an extreme example of only looking at construct options and doesn't even factor in the various other choices that you'll have to add in as well. Here's a late game example of what that might look like. Here you can see I wanted to try a run where I just had as many little dudes on screen as possible. I took the carrier ship, as well as drones and allies, and paired them with mods that made them go out and hunt down enemies instead of sticking by my side. Then I doubled down. I took the Overseer mod, which makes it so I could no longer attack at all, but doubled my construct limits. I gave my ally ships the ability to use my weapons since I couldn't, removed my shields entirely and gave them to my constructs, which happened to cause damaging energy orbs to rotate around them, and then effectively spent the endgame casually floating around, no attack, no shield, grabbing XP while my space Pikmin annihilated everything on screen. You could take the Railgun weapon and pair it with some damage increases, the Spectre ship that lets you cloak for extra damage, and the Calibrate mod which gives you extra velocity while not firing for a moment, which happens to scale into Railgun's damage. Grab as many multi-shots as you can, then take the Singular Strike super mod to make all those extra shots concentrate back into a single attack and disintegrate everything that isn't a boss with one click. Are you interested in burning enemies with damage over time? Well, you could shoot caustic darts, fire a thermal lance, create burning vortexes, ram into enemy ships to inject them with burn via the Viper ship, ignite them with your thrusters via the Firefly ship, create flaming trails, shoot out fireballs from behind, use the fiery Halo shield, or even ignite everything around you, including yourself, with the Dying Star super mod. Now, I could go on, but the point is that piecing these builds together is easily the most addictive part of the experience, and you'll have a lot of fun trying it out for yourself. As you play through multiple runs, you'll unlock new mods and super mods to add to the pool, as well as modifiers to make the game harder in exchange for more experience and faster level ups. There's an endless mode that loops the game after the final boss in case you want to see just how far you can take things, and a draft mode that lets you skip to the second loop and start the run with 35 levels in case you want to jump straight into the fire at the start. And yeah, there's not much else to say. Nova Drift is an example of taking a simple premise and nailing the execution. The combat is satisfying, the player choice is front and center, and there's enough variety to keep you hooked into that one more run mentality that makes this genre thrive. I'd absolutely recommend this game to both roguelike and shmup fans alike. Nova Drift goes for $18 on Steam, so if you're interested, go check it out. With that, thanks for watching, have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!